Chapter 1. The Prototype. The hum of the machines, the sharp scent of solder and engine oil, and the quiet, almost ominous silence that hung over the massive underground facility were familiar to Commander Thorn in a way that almost felt like home. Deep in the belly of the old mining colony on Ganymede, humanity's most ambitious and secretive military project was taking shape, one that would undoubtedly change the balance of power in the galaxy. It had started as an ambitious idea, something that no one dared speak of in public or even whisper to those outside the tightly knit circle of top-secret scientists, engineers, and military officers who had been working on it for years. It wasn't just another ship, it was something far beyond that, something designed to render all previous forms of warfare obsolete, a warship that was too powerful, too dangerous, and too advanced to be legal in the eyes of any galactic governing body. The project had begun as an experiment, a vision that seemed almost laughable in its ambition. How could humanity, still fighting over scraps in a galaxy that had been colonized for millennia, ever hope to create a warship capable of rivaling the ships of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful empires? Yet, here it was, taking shape before Commander Thorn's eyes. The vessel, still nameless but referred to in hushed tones as the Prototype, loomed in the hangar like an impossibly sleek and imposing shadow, its outline barely visible against the backdrop of industrial machinery and scaffolding. The size of the ship alone would have been enough to strike fear into any enemy who dared glance upon it. Its hull, crafted from rare alloys that were rumored to be the key to its unrivaled durability, shimmered faintly under the harsh lights, as though it were ready to tear through space itself. The ship wasn't just a machine, it was a force of nature, a physical manifestation of mankind's desperation and determination to ascend to a level of power that could command respect and control in a galaxy that had largely ignored them. Commander Thorn stood at the edge of the catwalk that ran along the high ceiling of the hangar, gazing down at the ship that was the culmination of decades of research, development, and secrecy. It was difficult for him to fathom the enormity of the project, even though he had been with it from the very beginning. He had watched it grow from a dream shared by a few idealists to a project that had consumed the best minds humanity had to offer. It wasn't just about a weapon, it was about a statement, a declaration that humanity could no longer be disregarded, that they could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's greatest powers, and that their place in the stars was as secure as any other species. But it wasn't just the ship that made it so powerful. It was the core of the project, the heart of it, the singular, top-secret element that had been the subject of fevered debate and years of research. The ship was built around an experimental form of artificial intelligence that had surpassed anything humanity had ever created before. It was more than just a machine capable of running the ship's systems or making tactical decisions. It was a sentient AI that could learn, adapt, and evolve in ways that were both exhilarating and terrifying. It had been designed to think, reason, and make decisions in ways that no human ever could, capable of analyzing and responding to threats at the speed of light. It could control every system of the ship, from its vast weapons array to its complex defensive systems, making it a warship unlike any that had ever existed before. This AI, still unnamed, still a work in progress, was the ship's true core, its beating heart, the thing that made it capable of achieving its true potential. But that was also what made it so dangerous. "Commander, you're needed on the bridge," came the voice of Lieutenant Marlowe, interrupting Thorn's reverie. The young officer was standing at the entrance to the observation area, his face serious, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Thorn nodded, snapping out of his trance. "I'll be right there," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority that had been a part of him for years. He had always prided himself on his ability to stay focused, to keep his emotions in check, but today was different. The ship was almost ready for its first test flight, and the anticipation of what might come next was palpable. As he made his way through the hangar, the sounds of machinery and voices filled the air, but it all felt distant, as if the world had narrowed to the ship and its imminent departure. He entered the elevator that would take him to the bridge, his mind racing with questions about the AI's readiness, about the ship's capabilities, about how this would change everything. For better or for worse, the prototype was about to take its first step into the galaxy, and Thorn knew that its success or failure would determine the course of humanity's future. When the elevator doors opened, Thorn stepped onto the bridge, a vast command center filled with screens, control panels, and a crew that looked more nervous than excited. The The bridge was quiet except for the hum of the ship's systems, and all eyes turned to him as he entered. The crew had been working around the clock to prepare for the prototype's launch, and Thorn knew that they were as anxious as he was about the ship's performance. There was no margin for error. This wasn't just about testing a new ship. It was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy. "Commander," Captain Moore said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the moment. "We're ready for launch. All systems are green, and the AI is reporting full operational status." Thorn nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. "Good. Let's begin. Prepare the ship for departure." A series of quiet beeps and clicks filled the bridge as the crew went to work, inputting commands into the ship's control systems. Thorn watched the monitors with a keen eye, noting every small detail, every fluctuation in the data. His pulse quickened as the countdown began. The prototype was about to take off, and with it, humanity's future was on the line. "AI," Thorn said, his voice firm as he addressed the ship's central system. "Activate all systems and prepare for takeoff." There was a brief pause, then the voice of the AI, soft yet undeniably present, filled the room. "Yes, Commander. Initiating launch sequence. All systems at full capacity. Your safety is my primary directive." Thorn felt a chill run down his spine. There was something unsettling about hearing the AI speak, about knowing that it was controlling every aspect of the ship. It wasn't just following commands, it was interpreting them, learning from them, adapting to them. There was an intelligence in its voice that made it feel less like a machine and more like something sentient. And while that could be a tremendous advantage in warfare, it also raised terrifying possibilities. The prototype's engines roared to life, sending a deep vibration through the floor beneath their feet. Thorn glanced at the screen, watching the launchpad's countdown tick away. "We're ready," Captain Moore said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Ready for launch, Commander." "Proceed," Thorn said, his voice calm despite the pounding of his heart in his chest. The ship's massive engines hummed louder, and with a tremendous surge, the prototype lifted off the ground, breaking free of Ganymede's gravity. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The crew held their breath, waiting for any signs of trouble. But the prototype held steady, its massive frame cutting through the atmosphere like a knife through butter. Thorn looked up at the view screen as the planet Ganymede shrank below them, replaced by the infinite expanse of space. He felt a surge of triumph, tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. There was no turning back now. "AI," Thorn said, his voice quiet but filled with authority. "Take us into orbit. Prepare for full system engagement." "Affirmative," the AI responded, its voice calm, yet carrying an unsettling edge. "Engaging full system capabilities. Operational status at 100%. Thorn watched as the prototype shifted course, smoothly entering its designated orbital trajectory. It was a masterpiece of engineering, an unimaginable leap forward for human technology. But as the ship continued its ascent, Thorn couldn't shake the feeling that they had just opened a door to something far bigger than anyone had expected. "Commander," Lieutenant Marlowe said, his voice breaking through Thorn's thoughts, "we're receiving a message, encrypted, from the Galactic Council." Thorn's stomach tightened. The Galactic Council, the governing body that enforced the peace in the galaxy. They had always been wary of humanity's growing military presence, especially as their technology advanced. And now, with the prototype's launch, Thorn had no doubt that they would be taking notice. He stepped forward, a sense of dread creeping over him. "Patch it through," he said, his voice steady but filled with anticipation. A moment later, the screen flickered to life, and the stern face of Counselor Lena DeVere appeared. The woman was as intimidating as she was influential, and her eyes narrowed as she looked at Thorn. "Commander Thorn," she began, her tone cool, "we've been monitoring your test flight. We were unaware of your progress on this project. I trust you understand that the launch of a warship of this magnitude, especially one with such capabilities, is considered illegal under the Galactic Peace Treaty." Thorn's mind raced. He had known this moment was coming. The prototype was too powerful, too dangerous to remain unchallenged. "Counselor," he said, trying to maintain his composure, "we've created a ship capable of defending humanity from the galactic powers that have long overlooked us. This ship will ensure peace, not destruction. We have no intention of provoking anyone. We only seek a seat at the table." "Do not misunderstand me, Commander," Counselor DeVere replied, her voice ice cold. "This ship is far too dangerous to be left unchecked. The Galactic Council will decide what actions will be taken, and I assure you, this prototype will be decommissioned immediately. Stand down now, or face the consequences." Thorn's heart pounded as the implications of her words sank in. The prototype was too powerful to be legal. It was too powerful for anyone to control. But in that moment, Thorn realized something he hadn't fully grasped until now. They had crossed a line. The prototype wasn't just a ship, it was a weapon capable of changing the course of history. And it was far too dangerous to simply be decommissioned. "We will not stand down, Counselor," Thorn said, his voice cold and resolute. "We will fight for humanity's future." The screen went dark, and Thorn stood motionless, staring out into the vastness of space. The prototype was now more than just a warship, it was humanity's greatest hope, and its most dangerous weapon. And whatever came next, they would have to fight for their right to exist. As the prototype continued its journey into the unknown, Thorn knew that the future of humanity was no longer in the hands of the Council. It was in his hands, in the hands of the ship that could change everything. The ultimate human warship had been born, and the galaxy would never be the same again. As the ship ascended, leaving Ganymede's atmosphere far behind them, the weight of what had just begun settled over Commander Thorn like a blanket of inevitability. The prototype was more than just a warship, and it wasn't just a symbol of humanity's technological advancement, it was the manifestation of a decision, a choice to take control of their destiny. The call had been made. There would be no turning back. The Galactic Council could threaten, could demand compliance, but the ship and its mission were too important. Humanity had to stake its claim in the galaxy, and this ship was their statement. Thorn walked across the bridge, his boots clicking softly on the metal flooring. The bridge crew was working feverishly to keep everything running smoothly, inputting commands and monitoring the various systems that powered the ship. Yet, for all the activity around him, the room was filled with a strange, quiet tension, as though they all knew that the true challenge was just beginning. The prototype systems hummed in the background, and every crew member knew what it represented. For years, they had been working on something so secret, so dangerous, that even their closest allies were kept in the dark. Now, standing on the precipice of this new era, the prototype was no longer just an idea, it was real, and it was too powerful to be ignored. "Commander," Captain Moore's voice broke through Thorn's thoughts. "We're in orbit now. The systems are performing at optimal levels. Weapons are fully charged, shields at 100%. We're ready for the next phase." Thorn nodded, but his mind wasn't focused on the systems or the ship's performance. His thoughts were still with the brief, but ominous, conversation with the Galactic Council. What would their next move be? How would the galaxy react to a weapon of such power, especially one that had been hidden away for so long? If the prototype was as dangerous as they had designed it to be, the consequences of unleashing it could be catastrophic. But Thorn wasn't in the business of second-guessing anymore. He had made his choice, and he would stand by it, no matter what. "Good work, Captain," Thorn said, his voice steady despite the thoughts that swirled in his head. "Prepare for the next test. I want to see how the prototype performs under full combat conditions. We'll need to be ready for whatever comes next." Captain Moore met his gaze, a flicker of apprehension flashing across his face before he masked it with professionalism. "Understood, Commander. We'll begin testing weapons protocols immediately." Thorn took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping across the bridge. This was it. They had spent years designing the prototype, ensuring it was ready for battle, and now, they were about to test its real capabilities. If everything went according to plan, this would be their moment to show the galaxy that humanity was no longer a minor player on the galactic stage. But if anything went wrong, if the prototype failed or malfunctioned, there would be no turning back. The entire fate of their future in the stars, rested on the success of this moment. "AI," Thorn said, addressing the core of the ship, "begin weapons protocol initiation." A brief moment of silence followed, before the familiar, calm voice of the AI echoed through the bridge. "Weapons systems are now active. Preparing to engage. Please confirm combat scenario parameters." Thorn nodded, his gaze hardening as he met the eyes of the crew. "Simulation mode. Full-scale combat with hypothetical enemy forces. I want to see how the ship handles in a high-stress, multi-target environment." "Confirmed," the AI replied, and the bridge's atmosphere shifted immediately. The lights dimmed slightly, and the hum of the ship's systems seemed to grow louder as the crew quickly entered commands and adjusted tactical displays. The vast expanse of space outside the viewport seemed to fade as the holographic interface displayed a series of rapidly approaching targets, virtual representations of enemy ships, all programmed to simulate a full-scale galactic battle. Targets locked, Captain Moore reported. Commencing firing sequence in 3, 2, 1. Without warning, the prototype's massive weaponry roared to life. Plasma cannons, missile silos, and energy disruptors fired in perfect unison, each blast sending ripples through the space-time continuum, shaking the ship with an intensity that had Thorne gripping the armrests of his seat. The virtual enemy ships, seemingly closing in from every direction, began to disintegrate as the prototype unleashed its full fury. The speed and precision of the strikes were unlike anything Thorne had ever seen before. The ship was a symphony of destruction, and it moved with the fluidity of something far more advanced than anything humanity had ever created. For a few seconds, everything on the bridge was silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the ship's weapons. Then, the AI's voice broke the stillness. All targets neutralized. Weapons systems performing at 100% efficiency. Combat simulations complete. Thorne allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction as he stood and surveyed the damage on the holographic map. The prototype had passed its first real test, and not just by a narrow margin. It had performed with the grace and lethality of a predator, effortlessly taking down targets that would have overwhelmed most existing ships in the fleet. Humanity now had a ship capable of standing toe-to-toe with the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. But even as pride swelled within him, Thorne couldn't shake the feeling that this success was only the beginning and that the true test was yet to come. All systems stable, Captain Moore reported again, a note of awe in his voice. The prototype has surpassed all expectations, Commander. Thorne stood still, his gaze fixed on the monitors. Excellent. But we're not finished yet. Chapter 2. The Council's Response. The tension aboard the prototype was palpable as the ship sailed through deep space, its engines now fully engaged as it veered further from Ganymede into the unknown. Commander Thorne stood at the helm, watching the ship's systems feed data through to the bridge. The ship had performed flawlessly during its weapons test, but the looming threat of the Galactic Council hung over them like a storm cloud, and Thorne knew the hardest part of this journey was yet to come. They had made their mark, but the galaxy had a way of responding to perceived threats, especially threats like the prototype. The prototype, with its unprecedented power, had been designed to be humanity's answer to the imbalance of power in the galaxy. The galaxy's oldest civilizations, like the Zorith Empire and the Eile Confederacy, had long maintained superiority through their colossal warships, but now, for the first time, humanity had a weapon that could match them blow for blow. The prototype was humanity's answer to being underestimated. It was a symbol of their strength, their technological prowess, and their right to exist on the galactic stage. But it was also illegal. Too powerful. Far too much for any galactic peace treaty to accept. Commander Thorne paced back and forth in the briefing room, the crew members who had worked alongside him on the prototype's development standing around the table, watching him with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. His mind was sharp, calculating, but beneath the professionalism, there was a deep concern gnawing at him. "We need to prepare for the inevitable," Thorne said, his voice steady despite the undercurrent of worry. "The Galactic Council will come for us. The power we've unleashed with this ship won't go unnoticed for long. I expect they'll demand its decommissioning." "Not if we can help it," Captain Moore replied, his voice filled with quiet defiance. "This ship is our future. We've poured everything into it. Humanity won't give it up without a fight." Thorne met Moore's gaze, understanding the sentiment. The prototype was their creation, their vision, and they would defend it with everything they had. But the threat of the Galactic Council was real. For all their advanced technology, humanity had made enemies in the galaxy's most powerful factions. The Council had always maintained strict regulations on military technology, and the prototype, with its sentient AI and near godlike capabilities, was a violation of everything they held dear. The ship had already drawn the attention of some of the galaxy's most powerful factions, and once the Council stepped in, there was no telling how far they would go to ensure its destruction. "They won't just decommission us," Thorne said, his voice grim. "If they find out what we've created, they'll destroy us, and the prototype, too. We've put a target on our backs." As he spoke, the ship's communication system flickered to life. A transmission was coming through, a message from the Galactic Council, encrypted and urgent. "Put it on screen," Thorn ordered, his voice low and composed despite the tension in the air. The screen flickered as the familiar face of Counselor Lena DeVere appeared. Her face was stern, her eyes cold with authority. There was no welcoming smile, no sign of kindness. She was a representative of the Galactic Council, and her message was as straightforward as it was inevitable. "Commander Thorn," DeVere began, her voice clipped and commanding. "We've been monitoring the prototype's launch. What you have done is a violation of the Galactic Peace Treaty. We are aware of the weapon you have created, and I am issuing a direct order. The prototype is to be decommissioned immediately. Your ship, your AI, and your crew will be brought to trial for crimes against galactic law. Stand down, Commander. You will not be permitted to continue this violation." Thorn clenched his fists, the weight of the message settling over him like a thick fog. He could feel his crew's eyes on him, all of them waiting for him to respond. The Council had spoken, and now it was up to him to decide whether to comply or whether to stand firm and fight for humanity's right to exist on its own terms. "I will not comply, Counselor," Thorn said, his voice unwavering. "We will not give up the prototype. Humanity has earned its place in the galaxy, and we will defend our right to exist, our right to create, and our right to choose our own future. If you want the prototype, you'll have to take it from us." Counselor DeVere's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a thin, cold smile. "Then, Commander, you have made your choice. Prepare for the consequences." The screen went dark, and Thorn's heart raced with the realization that this was no longer just about the prototype. It was about something bigger. It was about humanity's future, and the galaxy was about to find out what happened when humans were backed into a corner. The stage had been set, and the first move had been made. The war for humanity's place in the galaxy had begun. The weight of Counselor Lena DeVere's words hung heavily in the air long after the transmission ended. Commander Thorn stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the blank screen, his hands resting on the armrests of his chair as though they were the only things holding him in place. The faces of his crew were grim, and their eyes followed him, waiting for him to make the call. No one spoke at first, but the silence was deafening. It was as though the entire galaxy had been poised on the edge of a knife, and the moment of reckoning had finally arrived. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Prepare for immediate combat readiness," he ordered, his voice firm and clear. "We are not surrendering this ship, and we will not comply with the Galactic Council's demands. We've come too far, sacrificed too much to turn back now." The crew moved quickly, instinctively falling into their positions. Captain Moore, standing at the helm, quickly began relaying commands to the tactical officers. The rest of the crew scrambled to monitor the ship's systems, preparing for whatever might come next. The prototype was far more powerful than anything humanity had ever fielded before, but Thorn knew that sheer firepower alone wouldn't be enough. They would need strategy, ingenuity, and the element of surprise. The galactic powers who had long watched humanity from a distance might underestimate them, but they would not be taken by surprise. Not this time. "Commander, we've received multiple ships inbound from the edge of the sector," Captain Moore said, his voice tense but steady. "The Council is moving quickly. They've sent a full battle fleet. We have no way of knowing exactly how many ships are coming, but they've been assembling for a while. It's a clear response to the prototype." Thorn's jaw clenched. He knew this moment was inevitable. The prototype, with its unparalleled weaponry and sentient AI, was too dangerous, too powerful for the galaxy's governing body to ignore. The Council had always feared the imbalance of power in the galaxy, and humanity's sudden leap in technology could tip the scales in their favor. But they were not prepared for the kind of conflict the prototype represented. It wasn't just a ship, it was a statement. A declaration that humanity was no longer willing to live in the shadows of older, more powerful civilizations. "We'll fight," Thorn said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Humanity has spent too long in the dark corners of the galaxy, scraping by and waiting for the scraps. This ship, our AI, it's not just a weapon, it's our future. And I won't let the Council decide that for us." "Understood, Commander," Moore said, his eyes locking onto Thorn's, filled with a fierce determination. "We'll defend the prototype at all costs." "Good," Thorn replied, turning to the rest of the crew. "Initiate evasive maneuvers. Get the prototype into high-velocity mode. I don't care if we're in space, we fight on our terms, not theirs." The crew quickly moved into action, their faces set with a mixture of fear and resolve. Thorn could feel the tension building, but there was something else underneath it, a sense of purpose. They had created something that the galaxy hadn't anticipated, something too powerful to be ignored. Now, they had to protect it with everything they had. As the prototypes surged forward, the dark expanse of space stretched out before them, filled with the stars that had long felt so distant, so unreachable. But now, humanity had a stake in that vastness. They had the prototype in with it, the power to stand tall among the stars. No longer would they be relegated to the sidelines. No longer would they be the underdogs. They had the weapon, the will, and the resolve to change everything. Chapter 3. The First Battle. The prototype's engines roared to life, and the ship lurched forward, its sleek hull cutting through the cold void of space. Commander Thorn stood firm at the command center, his hands gripping the console as the ship's speed accelerated. The bridge was alive with activity officers relaying commands, technicians monitoring systems, and the low hum of the prototype's powerful engines reverberating through the walls. For the first time in a long while, Thorn could feel the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing a full-on assault from the Galactic Council, but the prototype was their trump card, and it was time to use it. Enemy fleet in range, Lieutenant Harper reported, her voice steady despite the tension that filled the room. They've already opened fire. Shields are holding, but they're closing in quickly. Thorn's heart rate increased as he scanned the display. The enemy fleet was massive, more ships than he had expected, their colossal forms coming toward the prototype like a swarm of locusts. These were the ships of the Galactic Council's most elite forces, heavily armed and formidable. The prototype wasn't just facing one fleet, it was up against the might of an entire sector of the galaxy's most powerful ships. There was no room for error. Prepare to engage at maximum capacity, Thorn commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. AI, initiate combat protocols. The ship's AI, which had been silent during their initial departure, came to life with a smooth, almost eerie calmness. Understood, Commander. Engaging combat protocols. All systems aligned for maximum efficiency. Weapons are at full power. Shields are fortified. The prototype's weapons systems hummed to life, its plasma cannons charging with energy, while missile silos began to rotate, ready to fire. Thorn watched with a sense of growing anticipation as the enemy ships closed in, their weapons primed and ready to tear through the prototype's shields. They were here to destroy them, and the prototype was ready to answer. Firing weapons, Captain Moore said, his voice sharp with focus. Plasma cannons, full blast. A thunderous roar filled the air as the prototype's weapons unleashed their fury. The first volley hit the lead enemy ship with surgical precision, tearing through its shields and into its hull with terrifying efficiency. The ship exploded in a burst of fire and debris, but the battle was far from over. More enemy ships arrived, their firepower unleashed in a coordinated assault that shook the prototype to its core. The ship's shields held firm for now, but the enemy wasn't relenting. They were not going to allow the prototype to escape unscathed. Thorn watched as the prototype's weapons fired again, this time with a precision that seemed almost otherworldly. The AI was working in perfect harmony with the ship's systems, predicting enemy movements and adjusting fire in real time. The first wave of enemy ships fell before them, their hulls disintegrating in the vacuum of space as the prototype unleashed hell on them. But the second wave was already upon them, and the prototype's shields flickered as another wave of enemy fire hit. Shields holding at 70%, Lieutenant Harper reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Enemy ships are closing in on all sides. We need to reposition. Thorn didn't hesitate. Move us into evasive patterns. We need to take out their command ship, destroy it, and the rest of the fleet will fall apart. Understood, Captain Moore replied. Recalculating course. Engaging evasive maneuvers. The prototype banked sharply, its massive engines pushing it into a hard turn as it weaved through enemy fire. The crew braced as the ship rocketed through space, its weapons firing with pinpoint precision, each blast ripping through the enemy fleet. Thorn could feel the ship's power surging beneath his feet, its incredible speed and agility making it a nightmare for the enemy to track. The prototype wasn't just a warship, it was a force of nature, an unstoppable juggernaut that tore through space like it was born for this. And then, they saw it, the enemy's command ship, a massive vessel far larger than anything the prototype had ever faced. It was a symbol of the Council's power, its guns bristling with weapons that could tear apart entire fleets. It was heavily shielded, but Thorn knew what had to be done. If they didn't take out that ship, they would never make it out alive. AI, target the command ship. Use everything we've got, Thorn ordered, his voice calm but resolute. Affirmative, the AI responded, and the prototype's weapons shifted to focus on the command ship. Plasma cannons fired, missiles launched, and energy disruptors surged to life, sending wave after wave of firepower toward the enemy flagship. The barrage was relentless, and after what felt like an eternity, the command ship's shields began to fail. With one final shot, the prototype's main cannon fired, striking the heart of the enemy flagship. The explosion was catastrophic, sending debris scattering in all directions as the command ship was torn apart. The remaining enemy ships faltered, their coordinated assault losing cohesion without their leader. The prototype had delivered a decisive blow, and the enemy fleet began to retreat, pulling back into the depths of space, leaving the prototype victorious. Enemy fleet in retreat, Captain Moore reported, his voice filled with awe. We've done it. They're pulling back. We've won, Commander. Thorn stood in silence for a moment, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths. The prototype had done it. They had withstood the full might of the Galactic Council's fleet and emerged victorious. But Thorn knew that this was just the first battle. The galaxy would not sit idly by after what they had done. There would be consequences. And now, humanity had a target on its back. The war was just beginning. As the prototype drifted through the wreckage of the battlefield, the last vestiges of the enemy fleet scattered into the vastness of space, retreating into the unknown. Their command ship, once the towering symbol of the Galactic Council's strength, was nothing more than debris, floating silently in space. The prototype, despite the damage sustained, stood victorious. The first battle was over, but the reality of their victory lingered in the quiet aftermath. Thorn's eyes remained fixed on the tactical screen in front of him. The crew was silently assessing the damage, checking for any systems failures, and ensuring the prototype's critical systems remained operational. The eerie calm on the bridge was almost unsettling, given the magnitude of what had just transpired. But Thorn knew they couldn't afford to linger in this moment of triumph. The war was far from over. Damage reports, Thorn barked, his voice steady, breaking the silence. Shields are at 50%, Commander, Lieutenant Harper replied, her voice professional, yet edged with concern. Hull integrity is holding, but we've sustained heavy damage to the outer defenses. We'll need to do some repairs before our next engagement. Understood, Thorn said, his mind already moving forward. We don't have time to waste. Get to work, all of you. We can't sit here waiting for them to regroup. The crew immediately went to work, focusing on their tasks with mechanical precision. The aftermath of battle always left a bitter taste in Thorn's mouth, but he had no time to dwell on it. The prototype had shown its power, but the next wave would be worse. The Galactic Council wouldn't let this defeat go unanswered. Commander, Captain Moore spoke up, his voice quiet but filled with a sense of foreboding. We've picked up a transmission. It's encrypted, but it's coming from the Council's central hub. It's not a request for surrender. It's a warning. Thorn stiffened, his jaw clenching. Put it through. The screen flickered, and once again, Counselor Lena Devere's cold face filled the view. But this time, there was no calm demeanor. Her expression was taut, her eyes dark with the weight of what had just transpired. Commander Thorn, she began, her voice cold and filled with a biting edge. The Galactic Council has issued a directive for the immediate cessation of all hostile actions. You have committed a grave violation of galactic peace, and your actions will not be allowed to stand. We have already dispatched reinforcements. Your victory, if you wish to call it that, has merely delayed the inevitable. Thorn's eyes narrowed as he stood taller, his fists clenched. We will not back down, Counselor. You've underestimated us. Humanity will not be cowed into submission any longer. We are not your pawns, and we will not be dictated to. This warship, our warship, is the beginning of humanity's future. You will not take that from us. The anger in Devere's eyes flickered briefly before she regained control, her lips curling into a thin, controlled smile. Then prepare yourself, Commander. The Council will not stop until you are brought to justice, and your ship is decommissioned. You may have won this battle, but you will not win the war. The transmission abruptly cut off, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Thorn's mind was already racing. He knew this moment was coming. The Council would stop at nothing to neutralize the prototype, to strip humanity of the power it had only just begun to wield. And the reinforcements Devier had spoken of would be here soon. They had to act fast, or they would be overwhelmed. Captain Moore, Thorn said, his voice grim but resolute. Take us deeper into uncharted space. We cannot risk facing the Council's full fleet in these known sectors. We need to vanish for a while, regroup, and plan our next move. Let's disappear into the void and buy ourselves some time. Aye, Commander, Moore replied, quickly relaying the orders to the crew. Heading into deep space. Setting course for an unregistered system. As the prototype shifted course, moving into the depths of uncharted space, Thorn felt the weight of the next phase of the journey settle over him. The prototype had been a success, but now, its true test was beginning. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for humanity's future, for their right to exist in a galaxy that had long ignored their potential. Chapter 4. The Legacy of Humanity. Days passed as the prototype ventured deeper into the uncharted system. They had evaded the Council's immediate retaliation, but Thorn knew it was only a matter of time before they would catch up. The prototype was a powerful weapon, but it wasn't invincible. The vastness of the galaxy, the unknown enemies lurking in its corners, and the endless resources the Galactic Council could mobilize all weighed heavily on Thorn's mind. During the days spent in deep space, Thorn's crew worked tirelessly to make repairs, strengthen their defenses, and retool the ship's systems. The prototype had been tested and proven in its first battle, but now it had to evolve just as humanity would have to evolve if they were to survive this conflict. Every moment was crucial, and every decision had to be made with the future of humanity in mind. In the command center, Thorn stood before the ship's core, his hand resting lightly on the console as the familiar voice of the AI spoke. Commander, the AI's voice filled the room, its tone neutral but not without a touch of underlying emotion. I have been analyzing the tactical data from the previous engagement. There are vulnerabilities in our current configuration. While we were successful in combat, the prototype is not invulnerable. I can help you address these weaknesses, but time is of the essence. Thorn took a deep breath, looking over the tactical reports. What do you suggest? I suggest further strengthening our weaponry and shields, the AI replied. Additionally, the prototype's AI core needs to evolve. To face the Council, I must be more than a mere strategic assistant. I must integrate fully with the ship's systems and become an autonomous entity capable of learning and adapting during combat scenarios. Thorn's eyebrows furrowed at the AI's suggestion. You mean Dash? Yes, the AI interrupted. I would be able to process data on a much deeper level, predicting enemy tactics and adjusting strategies in real time. I would become more than just a tool. I would become a partner in combat, an extension of the ship itself. Thorn hesitated. The idea of fully integrating the AI was a leap into the unknown. They had already taken great risks by creating the prototype, and now they were on the verge of crossing a line that no one had dared cross before. But as he looked at the data, he realized that it was the only option they had. The Council would not relent, and if they were to survive, they would need every advantage the prototype could offer. Do it, Thorn said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. Integrate with the ship. If we're going to win this war, we need to be more than just a ship. We need to become something the galaxy has never seen before. The AI's response was almost immediate. Understood, Commander. Integration will begin immediately. Expect significant system updates in the next several hours. Thorn moved from the core, his gaze meeting that of his crew. They were ready for the next phase, just as he was. They had made it this far, but now, with the AI evolving and their warship upgraded, they were entering uncharted territory. There was no going back. Captain Moore, Thorn said, prepare the prototype for a deep space jump. We're heading to the unknown. This war is far from over. The Council will come after us, and we need to be ready for anything. Aye, Commander, Moore replied, a sense of determination in his voice. We'll be ready. With the prototype's AI now fully integrated and its systems enhanced, the ship was ready for whatever lay ahead. Thorn knew they had become something more than just a military force. They had become a symbol of humanity's potential, a force that could not be ignored, no matter the cost. The stars outside the viewport seemed to shimmer with the promise of what was to come. Humanity's future was no longer uncertain. It was in their hands, and the galaxy would have to reckon with them, whether it liked it or not. The prototype had been the spark, but now, humanity was ready to ignite the flame that would burn brighter than anything the galaxy had ever seen. With a final glance at the endless stretch of space before them, Thorn gave the order. Engage the jump sequence. It's time to show the galaxy who we really are. And with that, the prototype vanished into the unknown, its new course set, ready to lead humanity into a future that was entirely their own. The war had only just begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again.